Hey everybody, Dirili here. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Hakuouki Demon of the Fleeting Blossom. We are on Saito Hajime's route, and I think we should be heading toward another ending soon. Not sure how soon or if it's going to be in this episode or not. We shall see. So you can just sit back, relax, and let me read you a story. We were just starting to get worried you might have been rubbed out by the Imperial Army before we could meet up with you. Should have known Hajime wouldn't screw up like that, though. He grinned and let out a laugh. It seemed like he was feeling much better than he had when we last parted. Oh gosh, I'm so glad you're both safe. I smiled and wiped tears from my eyes, but Saito frowned.
Commander, what happened to your leg?
I had been so happy to see them alive, I'd barely noticed that Hijikata had been favoring his left leg.
This is just a scratch I got at Utsunomiya. Doesn't hurt much, so I guess I might not be able to run as fast as I used to. A little annoying.
He smiled, although it didn't seem to me like there was much cause to smile about our situation.
Saito, I heard about all the fighting you've been doing. They're talking about you all over.
Saito slumped.
Shirakawa Castle, the center of our defense, was lost. We couldn't retake the castle. Ultimately, we had no choice but to retreat. I'm not sure how much longer the line can hold now.
His face was taut as he spoke, and when he finished, his gaze fell to the ground and stayed there. Hijikata, however, only smiled sadly.
You did good.
What happened to him? He'd been so cold and intimidating once, or at least I felt like he had. Now, though, he seemed almost kind. Well, there's not many men left to keep in line anymore. What had happened while we were apart that changed him so utterly? After another moment of awkward silence, Saito finally asked the question we had feared the answer to. About Kondo?
Commander, what happened to Chief Kondo?
Hijikata let out a long, tired sigh. When he spoke, his voice was clipped and cold.
I couldn't help him.
Saito's face fell. Deep down, we'd all felt it even before he spoke, but to be faced with the dark, undeniable truth was something else entirely. I felt as if a great, powerful hand had wrapped itself around my chest and begun to squeeze. Saito swallowed and blinked.
Did he take his own life?
Hijikata shook his head.
No, they cut off his head.
His voice shook as he spoke. Even though either one was a death sentence, for a samurai the difference between being beheaded and being given the chance to cut oneself open was like night and day. Since before anyone could remember, it had been said that a person's soul resided in their stomach. I actually didn't know that. By cutting open his stomach, the home of his soul, a samurai claimed innocence and earned an honorable death. It was far more painful than having one's throat slit or head chopped off, but the willingness to suffer through that pain symbolized the true warrior spirit. To be beheaded, however, was nothing more than punishment. You were offered no honor, nor a chance to redeem yourself. Your head was simply separated from your body.
Kondo asked him to let him do it, but those goddamn sons of bitches told him.
He choked on the words, and I could hear his teeth as they ground together in fury and despair. He took a deep breath, set his jaw, and spoke, though his voice still trembled.
They told him that a farmer doesn't get to ask to die like a samurai. How the hell can they call themselves men after that?
His hands balled into white-knuckled shaking fists. Never before had I seen Hijikata so upset. For Kondo and Hijikata, who had been born the sons of farmers and aspired to become samurai, nothing could have been more horrible. Hijikata seemed almost on the verge of angry tears, and if he had been alone, I suspected he would have cried. Saito seemed at a loss for words. He stared blankly for several long moments before he finally spoke.
I see. The chief must have been filled with regret.
Hijikata glared at Saito.
No, not regret.
Saito's eyes went wide.
When those bastards told him they were going to chop off his head, I'd bet money they were hoping he'd cry and beg for mercy and piss himself. But I heard he didn't cry or run away, or even tell them what a pack of ignorant sons of whores they were. No, he just said, "Oh, I see, I understand," and gave them that smile of his, and that was it. Then he asked if he could shave before they did it, 'cause it seemed like it would be rude to the king of the underworld to show up in his house with half a beard.
Oh, Hijikata looks like it's so endearing to him.
Can you believe that? After what they did to him? I don't give a damn what anyone else says. That man was a true warrior.
And so are you, Hijikata.
How many people have the balls to look death in the face and say something like that?
Saito hung his head in silence. I guess it wasn't quite as endearing to Saito. Hijikata's words drove a dagger into my heart, but then, what could he have said that wouldn't have?
Commander, I just received orders from the Aizu army. We've been ordered to depart immediately. We're returning to the front to retake Shirokawa Castle.
Shimada had run all the way back to us, and he was bent over for a moment to catch his breath.
The time has finally come.
He stood and made ready to depart, but...
Hold on, Saito. This is a bad time to try to take Shirokawa. Let's say we bust ass and drive them out of it. They'll just call in reinforcements and take it back from us. We'd send men to their deaths for nothing.
As we've done many times before recently.
But... better plan. Head to Sendai, hook up with other domains who are willing to fight, and continue the war from there. The Aizu have done a lot, but determination alone only gets you so far.
Saito said nothing. Silence was nothing strange for him, but usually he would have responded to an order with a curt "yes, sir," and departed to do his duty. This time, however, it seemed clear that there was something he wanted desperately to say, but couldn't quite bring himself to do so.
I apologize for my impertinence, Commander, but I believe the Shinsengumi owes the Aizu domain a great deal. Without the Aizu, the Shinsengumi would have never existed. Indeed, even the name Shinsengumi was given to us by the lord of the Aizu domain. Now the Aizu are a single domain fighting against the armies of nearly half a nation. If ever there was a time to repay the debt we owe them, I believe that time would be now.
Hijikata's eyebrows went up, and he cocked his head at Saito. After all, though he hadn't refused an order outright, it was likely as close to it as the commander had ever seen him come. Hijikata crossed his arms, and stood a while and thought before he finally spoke.
I understand what you're saying. Thing is, if we keep fighting small skirmishes, all we do is tire our men out.
Exactly, we need strategy.
And that's what happened at Utsunomiya. We busted our balls to take that castle, and we sat on it for all of a couple days before they took it back. I'd bet this'll be the same thing.
His argument made perfect sense, and from a strategic standpoint, there was no disputing that he was correct. But Saito said nothing. Instead, he stared down at the floor, his lips drawn tight. Hijikata sighed, and gave Saito a sideways smile.
Alright, Saito. Don't give me this crap. We've known each other for how long? You got something to say it. I don't think all that junk about debt and owing people is what you're really trying to tell me here. Just spit it out.
Saito frowned and tightened his fists.
It was you and Kondo, and Soji, Shinpachi, Sano, and everyone else at Shiei Hall who showed me that it wasn't wrong to wear my sword on the right. It was the people in Shiei Hall who allowed me to begin to rediscover the path of the warrior. They are my soul, my sword. We moved to Kyoto. I had grown, but I still had no domain and no life as a warrior. It was the Shinsengumi and the Aizu who gave me the chance to make that life a reality once again. The Shinsengumi and the Aizu embodied all that it meant to be a warrior. It's only natural for a warrior to be with his sword, and a sword is always at one's hip.
His voice faded into silence. Perhaps he still had yet to find his answer. Hijikata looked at Saito, and his smile seemed almost troubled.
I guess we never thought we'd have to pick between the Shogunate and the Aizu, huh? Are you really sure about this? Those guys out there, especially the Choshu, hate the Aizu's guts. They did even before all this started. Hell, I think they hate the Aizu more than the Shogunate. They're going to send as many men as they have, and if you die in battle, they'll treat your corpse like any other pile of trash.
Saito nodded silently.
I'm prepared for the worst.
He looked up at Hijikata, and I could see in his eyes that he had made his decision.
If I was forced to choose between being a sword that's lost its master and a warrior without a sword, and if both choices were right, then I would choose to be a warrior without his sword. I would like to remain an Aizu.
Hijikata looked at him for a moment, and then a melancholy smile twisted his mouth.
I see. Guess this is where we say goodbye then, huh?
No more splitting up, why? Darn it, Saito. Don't you know there's strategy and there's just throwing your life away? Saito hunched his shoulders and hung his head.
I'm sorry. Nothing to apologize for. Pretty clear you thought about this. You made your choice, and I respect that. But damn, never thought I'd hear you talk that much. Guess I didn't know you as well as I thought.
Hijikata's voice was jovial, or at least he was trying to be, but Saito didn't look up. Or perhaps he simply couldn't bring himself to. I could see so many things running through his mind, feelings of guilt, of regret, the desire to stay with Hijikata and the Shinsengumi. When he finally spoke, his voice shook. Hijikata, do you remember the first time we visited Shiei Hall? Hijikata let out a short, bitter laugh.
Think I could forget that? Not likely. We didn't have bamboo sticks back then, just heavy wooden practice swords, but you still went balls out. If you hadn't fought Soji first, I'm sure you would have broken some of your opponent's bones. Hell, you could have killed someone. Soji wasn't any different though. The way he swung that thing, I think he thought there was a real blade on it, and he was going to cut you in half with it. If we hadn't stopped the two of you, I think one of you would have left in a box.
Or maybe even both. He sighed. So many of the men of the Shinsengumi had spent their youth in Shiei Hall. For Saito, it had been the first place ever to accept his style for what it was. No doubt it was special to him. When we finished, that was the first time anyone had watched me fight and not called me a cheater or a heretic. For being left-handed?
Well, when you're fighting with a real sword, you don't have time to call somebody a cheater. Waste time to talk, and you're dead before the words are out of your mouth. Besides, fighting with your left hand isn't cheating. Hell, to you, people fighting right-handed are cheating just as much as you are.
Exactly. Those words must have brought Saito a great deal of happiness when he first heard them years ago. I remember I told you then. If you were Kondo ordered me to, I would kill anyone, whether they were famous nationalist samurai, daimyo, or even foreigners.
And I gave you a lot of dirty jobs, didn't I? I'm sorry for that.
Saito shook his head. I chose to follow your orders. I do not regret that choice. I had intended to follow those orders forever, but... He pursed his lips and looked away again, unsure of what to say.
Saito, don't beat yourself up for doing this, alright? You said it yourself, didn't you? If the Aizu domain represents real warriors, then we're the swords. Yes. Remember what I said at Osaka? We can't fight wars with swords anymore. The time for the sword is dead and gone. What's coming now is an era of warriors without swords. The choice you made isn't wrong.
Saito blinked suddenly, as if to clear tears from his eyes. I saw his jaw clench and unclench rapidly, and his breath was strained. He turned away, perhaps afraid that if he tried to speak, he might cry. We were silent for several moments before Hijikata nodded to Shimada.
Shimada, what about you? Oh, I'll be going with you, of course, Hijikata. I've come this far, I might as well follow you all the way to the end.
Heisuke, are you going with Hijikata too? Huh? Oh, I already died once, I guess. I've been trying to figure out if there was any point to me dying and then coming back to life like this. He stopped. Did you find your answer? Well... He scratched at the bridge of his nose, a faraway look in his eyes. If I died back then instead of becoming a fury, I think I would have only really had one regret. I mean, I put a lot into this Shinsengumi thing, right? Would have been a shame for me not to see how it ends.
How it ends? Don't like the sound of that, Heisuke.
Heisuke just grinned back at him. Besides, Hijikata barely knows which way's up right now. I couldn't abandon him when he's so vulnerable. Somebody's gotta watch his back. I see. So it's just me and Saito against the world. We'd been on the same path for so long, but now it seemed that we were going to go our separate ways. It was sad to be sure, but none of our choices felt wrong.
So, Chizuru, what are you going to do?
Is there any question? What was I going to do? Hijikata had said earlier that the battle the Aizu were about to fight would almost certainly end in their defeat. If I stayed, I might very well die. Then again, the same could be said for Saito. If I chose to go with the Shinsengumi, I might never see him again. I must decide to stay. Be decisive about it. There was no question. I'll stay here. Several sets of surprised eyes turned to stare at me. The most stunned were Saito's. I seemed to have shocked his earlier tears right out of him. I shocked his tears away. He still said nothing, but the unspoken question on his face was clearly, why? Oh, come on, haven't you noticed my affection for you yet? It's the girl that's supposed to be oblivious, not the guy. Come on, Saito.
You've been listening, right? This place is going to turn into a slaughterhouse. If you stay, there's a pretty good chance you're going to die a horrible death. Are you sure about this?
Yes. It would have been lying to say I wasn't scared, terrified even, but the thought of never being able to see Saito again. No, there was only one choice.
Well, guess I shouldn't ask why.
That's right, he can see it, even if Saito can't. His eyes flicked to Saito, who simply stood in silence and glared at me. Don't give me that look, come on.
Right. Well, you two talk it out. Change your mind and you can catch up with us later.
He gave me a pat on the shoulder, then turned to Shimada and Heisuke and walked off down the road. Saito waited until their footsteps had faded before he began to speak.
Why did you do that?
I hadn't heard him speak so coldly in a long time. I shrank back at the ice in his voice, but I didn't leave.
It's not too late. You can still catch up to Hijikata.
No! His voice cooled even further.
Were you listening to what he said to you?
You can't frighten me into running away from you.
Aizu will become a battlefield. There's no guarantee that we'll survive. If you stay here, you'll die in vain.
Well, the only way you're getting me to leave here is if you come with me. I looked back at him, and suddenly my fear vanished. Saito, you're planning to die here, aren't you? Instead of responding, he leaned back and regarded me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. I didn't think he would lie to me. Dishonesty wasn't in his character, but I wasn't sure what he would do.
What if I told you that I was?
I had no illusions about the connection between Saito and myself. Whatever thread might have bound us to one another was very, very thin. We had made no plans or promises about the future, and to be perfectly honest, I didn't even know what he thought of me. But I did know that we had talked on occasion, and during those brief moments, I felt that I had caught a glimpse of his heart. I didn't know if that gave me the right to say what I was about to, but I had little to lose, and I knew it might be my last chance. I tell you I was definitely staying then. I want to be with you until the end. The ice returned to his gaze.
Because I saved your life? I was only doing as Hijikata ordered me to. That was my duty, nothing more. You would be a child and a fool to put your life in danger for that. Now leave.
It was clear enough what he expected me to do, but I stood my ground. No. I don't just want to stay with you because you saved my life.
Then why?
I let his words hang in the air before I spoke. Do you really not want me here? To look into those cold, angry eyes was no easy task, but I had to know. Saito had told me once that he could look into someone's eyes and know if the words they spoke were the truth. He stared at me for seconds that seemed like hours before he finally turned away. When he spoke, his voice was a hoarse whisper.
I don't want you to die.
Something deep in my heart told me that he was speaking the truth, or something close to it. I don't want you to die either. But I understand that you might. This is a desperate battle. I also understand that if you abandon Aizu now, you'd never forgive yourself. So, I want to stay with you. Whatever happens to us, I want to share it. I know I'm probably being a little forward. I mean, I don't even know how you feel. For a long time, Saito said nothing. I suspected he was thinking of all ways he might try to convince me to change my mind and go back to Hijikata, but at last he just sighed and looked away.
I'm not as strong of a man as you think I am.
Oh, how wrong you are.
I don't know how to figure out what's right and what's wrong. Even now, there's a part of me that wants to forget about the Aizu and run after Hijikata. If I hurried, I could probably still catch up to them. I don't know if I'll be able to maintain control once I get injured, or find death staring me in the face, or feel the bloodlust take over me. But I want to take my last breath as a warrior. I want to go bravely into the next world, just like Kondo did. If I am to have any hope of doing so, then I must do what my heart tells me is right. That is why I choose to stay in Aizu.
There was more emotion in his voice than usual, and he sounded almost confused, as if he was not used to speaking so freely. This, I thought, must be the real Saito.
However, if to you I seem to be a perfect warrior who has no weaknesses, then there is no reason for you to see how ugly I will become. Better we part now. Go. You shouldn't have to see the truth.
His voice was only just above a whisper, but it hit me with all the force of a scream. I didn't move. I'd never expected you to always be right. If you suffered through the agony of your choice and still made it, then that's enough for me. Whatever happens, you'll never be ugly to me. So please, let me stay with you. I could see frustration on his face as well as surprise. I thought perhaps he would simply grab me by the wrist and drag me boldly back to Hijikata. Ah! He leaned in toward me suddenly, and I jumped as his hand took hold of my shoulder and drew me in close to him. It's about time! We looked into one another's eyes, our faces only inches apart. I could feel his ragged breath against my skin. His arm shook, and when I looked at him, I sensed fear.
That is your answer, then?
His eyes drilled into my own, and his voice hung in every word he spoke.
You swear that you'll not regret this choice, that the words you've spoken are what you feel is right.
His eyes were so deep, and I could feel them taking in every part of me, looking for any sign that what I said next was not the truth. I had never seen him look at me that way before. Yes, I want to be with you. I looked into the eyes of the man I loved and smiled. His eyes suddenly glistened with unshed tears, and for a moment he looked like he was both laughing and crying at once.
Your eyes tell the truth. You speak from the heart. No, from the soul.
He let out a long sigh of relief and leaned in closer. I could feel his breath as the distance closed, but the moment before our lips met, he hesitated. Don't hesitate! Just do it! Perhaps he was reminding himself of the words we just spoken. I couldn't say. But he seemed to make up his mind and close those last few fractions of an inch. At last, our lips met. Never before had I kissed a man. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, as suddenly it was rather hard to breathe, but it felt good. His lips shook as they pressed against mine, but not with fear or anger. I wanted to believe that this kiss promised great things for us, but the future was still a mystery. Before us lay battle, but perhaps beyond that. His warmth filled my entire body, and I felt my love for him reflected back with equal intensity. Our souls were one. That alone made us happy enough to forget the death that very likely awaited us on the fields of Aizu. The following night. Saito! I had just returned to the camp after going out to look for firewood when I saw Saito writhing in pain. His hand was clutched to his chest, so tight that his fingernails had dug into the skin, drawing blood. We have to make him endure it, which probably means it's a bad ending first. But at least the good ending will be saved for last, if that's true. Oh, my poor baby. Groans escaped his clenched teeth as his hand grasped at his chest in pain. Saito, please hold on. I wrapped my arms around him and squeezed. He seemed to be in much more pain than the last time, and his breathing sounded horrible. Just listening to it made my own lungs cry out in sympathy.
Soon. This will all be over. Soon.
He shook in my arms, repeating those words to himself over and over. I knew what he meant. The final battle was approaching, and once it had passed, one way or another, our trials would be at an end. The following day, we departed for Shirakawa Castle, along with a few warriors who'd chosen to go with Saito. Even though we were clearly at a disadvantage, I wasn't scared. Saito, too, looked refreshed, as if he had finally conquered some inner demon. Guess he found his answer. We reached the castle later that night, but the moment we arrived, it was clear something was wrong.
That's odd. I don't sense anyone here.
That's not a good sign. The Aizo had told us that the Imperial Army had sent their men into the castle to secure it, but the castle and the surrounding area were strangely quiet and completely devoid of any human life. Oh yeah, I remember this from what Kazuma had said in his route. We were still waiting for the men we sent out as scouts to return when we heard sounds of movement from nearby. Saito's eyes narrowed, and his right hand dropped to his scabbard.
Stay behind me, Chizuru.
Right! I ducked around behind Saito's back and peered out at the area the noise had come from. He scanned the bush intently, his ears alert for even the slightest sound.
It's not an animal. Those are human footsteps. I think 2, perhaps 3. If they were our men on their way back, they would have let us know.
He touched his left hand to the hilt of his sword, just as the footsteps came near enough for me to hear. There was a flash of silver, and Saito's blade leapt from its sheath. The mysterious enemy had sensed us as well, and drawn their sword in time to block Saito's attack. At that moment, the clouds covering the moon drew back, and in front of us stood... What? Shinpachi!
Damn it! Guess there's a couple badasses in the Imperial Army after... Saito?
Nagakura! Oh, I'm so happy to see you! Saito's eyebrows rose, and he stepped back to resheath his sword.
Shinpachi, what are you doing here?
Well, you could ask you the same thing.
Hey, I could ask you the same thing. And damn, man, watch where you swing that. You're gonna put someone's eye out.
That's the least of your worries with Saito. It's all fun and games until someone loses a head. Nagakura, what are you doing here?
Huh? Oh, well, we...
Is Sanosuke here too?
Hey, Shinpachi, who the hell are you talking to?
That voice.
Whoa, Saito, what are you doing here?
What about me? Recognize me too. You're here too, Harada? Yay, a happy reunion, though I don't think it'll last very long.
I think you had better explain. Not much to explain. Sano and I came to Aizu to fight the Imperial Army, but... Well, remember the new Furies we found in Kofu? We saw a couple of them just running around here, so we decided to see what they're up to. We followed them for a while, but eventually they headed into Shirokawa Castle. Best we can guess, that's their new headquarters.
What? If the new Furies were here, then perhaps Kodo.
I hear more men. 4 or 5 this time.
Well, at least now we've got some reinforcements. Decent ones at that. His hand dropped to his sword again, and Nagakura and Harada followed suit, their faces suddenly grim. In an explosion of movement, human forms leapt out of the bushes and onto the road. They moved so quickly and jumped so high, they couldn't have possibly been people, which meant...
More of those damn Furies! Alright, time for one to fall on my spear.
The Furies were armed with swords, but against a spear that put them at a significant disadvantage. The tip lashed out and buried itself in the left breast of one of our attackers.
Damn it, almost.
His aim had been off only slightly, and as he pulled the blade free, the Fury's wound had already begun to heal.
Yo!
Nagakura ran forward as well, his sword flying in wide arcs.
Sure is a pain to try and hit these bastards in the heart on the first go. They heal up so damn fast, we can't just wait for them to bleed out.
But even as he complained, a grin spread across Nagakura's face as he waded into the Fury, swinging left and right with wild abandon. Saito, on the other hand...
As crude as ever, aren't you?
His strikes were quick and precise, almost surgical. Every time he moved, his sword pierced through the heart of a Fury. Their cries of agony echoed through the dark forest. Even with all the advantages the Water of Life had given them, the Furies were simply no match for the skill of Saito, Nagakura, and Harada.
That's it, huh? Damn good thing there weren't more of them. If this had been like Kofu, we'd have been here till morning.
As he reached down to wipe his sword clean, one of the Furies spoke.
Help. Is... What, you still kicking? I guess I'll put you out of your misery.
He reached for his sword.
Wait, I think he's trying to say something. Perhaps there's still a man in there somewhere.
He walked toward the Fury and stared down at it for a moment.
You said something about the Aizu.
His mouth opened and closed weakly, but the strength was fading quickly from his body.
Some blood should heal you.
Saito pulled his wakizashi and slid it across his arm. He held the cut over the Fury's face and let the several large drops of blood fall into his mouth. Some of the Fury's wounds closed, and his breathing grew more measured.
Now, tell us what you know. And don't try anything stupid. You might be a Fury, but this is 3 against 1.
4, technically, though I'm not very useful. The man nodded shakily and slowly started to speak.
They're experimenting on Furies in Shirokawa. Once the experiments are finished, they won't need the old Furies like us anymore. They'll kill us. We tried to escape, but then the bloodlust.
Oh, I feel sorry for them.
Who are you? Are you part of the Imperial Army?
The Fury shook his head.
We're not from an army. We're just farmers and peasants they hired. The Imperial Army said they'd give anyone a job, so I signed up. If I'd known what they were going to turn us into, I'd never have done it. That old bastard made us drink something. I don't know what it was.
He had to be talking about Kodo.
Every time we were sent out fighting, some of us would go crazy. Then when they didn't need us anymore, we were just taken out and shot like dogs.
Had the man I'd once called my father really done such horrible, unspeakable things?
You said something about Aizu a minute ago. What are those Imperial bastards planning? The old man's planning to use the Aizu soldiers that were protecting Shirokawa Castle for his experiments.
The color was rapidly draining from his face, and it was lined with pain as he spoke.
I don't want to die. I never thought I'd turn into a monster. I didn't want it to end like this.
He reached out for Saito, his fingers as white as bone. Within moments, his entire body was the same strange white, and then he simply crumbled to ash, like so much spent incense.
What the hell just happened? They don't do that even when we stab them in the heart, or shoot them with silver bullets. What else is there about the Furies that we don't know? I guess we'll have to go to the castle and find out. If what he said is true, then the Aizu are in big trouble, aren't they? Things are going to get pretty hot in Aizu soon. I'll bet they want to finish these experiments of theirs as soon as possible, so they can send a whole bunch of Furies off to the front.
You're right. They nodded to one another and started off towards Shirokawa Castle. Except for Saito. What's wrong, Saito? We have to hurry. But he didn't seem to even hear me.
In the time I spent with the Shinsengumi, I've killed countless men. My sword is soaked with blood. I'm not such a hypocritical fool that I would claim it's wrong to take a life. In a way, I suppose what I've done is hardly different than killing a man for the sake of research. Can I really argue that one sort of murder is superior to another? Still, there is a sort of evil that can only be judged by those whose own souls are also tainted with evil. I have judged the men who created these Furies to be evil. I will kill them.
Sounds good to me. After all, turning them into Furies isn't just killing them. I mean, they're making them suffer horribly for long periods of time, for the most part. Whereas the way Saito kills them, it's at least pretty much merciful. Alright, well, I'm gonna have to stop there for the day. Well, we didn't reach the next ending yet. Maybe in the next episode we'll see it. So I hope to see you there or in some of my other videos. And I'd be so grateful for any likes, comments, subscriptions, or shares with your friends to show some support. Thank you so much for joining me, and I wish you all health, happiness, and safety. Dirili signing out. Bye-bye, everybody.